Hello, I'm Esther Giduyu. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. U.S. President Joe Biden is primed to make his final address before the United Nations General Assembly this week. He also is expected to meet separately with global leaders in New York. And the last U.S. service members leave Niger as part of America's military withdrawal. U.S. Africa Command's Major General Kenneth Ekman speaks to VOA about their departure. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The annual United Nations meeting of world leaders is underway on Monday with the Summit for the Future. VOA's UN correspondent Margaret Bashir has more.
The UN General Assembly kicked off a marathon week of diplomacy with a Summit for the Future.
I called for this summit because our world is heading off the rails and we need tough decisions to get back on track.
The signature event adopted by consensus a wide-ranging Pact for the Future, a blueprint aimed at ensuring that international institutions can deliver in a world that has changed dramatically since they were created in 1945. Russia, which raised numerous objections to elements of the pact as the months-long negotiations were wrapping up last week, sought to amend the document moments before its adoption, but failed. The pact has lofty goals for eradicating poverty, ending hunger, and building peaceful and inclusive societies. It also seeks to bridge the digital divide. Now the hard work of implementing it begins.
But our people know instinctively that this will only be talk unless there's a fundamental change in what we do and how we do it, and who is seen and heard in the corridors of decision-making.
The Secretary General met one-on-one with several world leaders Sunday, including Leslie Voltaire, a member of Haiti's Transitional Presidential Council. They discussed the need to ensure an elected government is in place by February 2026, as agreed by Haitian stakeholders, and to work together to boost international support for addressing gang violence and the dire humanitarian situation. The wars in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan will be center stage this week. Millions of people have been displaced or made refugees from just these three conflicts, and humanitarian efforts to assist them are under strain.
Humanitarians are not stretchable forever. We also have limitations, and I warn decision makers, politicians, that unless they redouble efforts to put a peaceful end or to negotiate ceasefires at least, we are going to be in trouble.
Grandi expressed concern about spillover from the Gaza war, most recently in Lebanon. He told VOA that an expansion of the conflict may have incalculable consequences.
For more on what's happening at the United Nations General Assembly, I'm joined live from New York by VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bashir. Margaret, what more can you tell us about the Pact for the Future and its impact on Africa?
Hello, Esther. So the pact, one of the big things for Africa, I think, is Security Council reform. That is something the Africans have been asking for literally decades, and the pact includes it. The United States said last week that they would be open to 2 permanent seats for African countries. It would be up to Africa to decide which countries get those 2 permanent seats. They wouldn't have veto power under the U.S. Vision of Security Council reform, but it is really important that Security Council expansion is in this Pact for the Future. It's the international consensus that that's what countries want to see. And it even says in the pact that it will redress the historical injustice against Africa, because, as you know, many countries were not even independent. They were still under colonial rule at the time that the Security Council was created after World War II. So they didn't even get a chance really to have a permanent seat. So this is something that's very important to many African leaders. And also in the pact that's important for Africa, I think, is the area about reforming the international financial institutions and debt restructuring. A lot of countries in Africa drowning in debt, especially since the pandemic. So that is an important aspect, as is bridging the global digital divide. We see many countries in Africa not online in the numbers that they should be and benefiting from access to information. So also a lot about the pact is listening to the youth, to the next generation, and there's a huge young population on the continent. So these, I think, are some of the main points for Africa.
Well, Tuesday, Margaret, is a main event starts there with the annual debate in the General Assembly. Who do we expect to hear speaking from Africa?
Yeah, on Tuesday, Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa. We'll hear from the presidents of Sierra Leone, Angola, and Nigeria, all scheduled to speak. But I think with developments today in the Middle East, we may see a lot of the attention moving away from the podium and to the sidelines of the General Assembly, where world leaders and diplomats are going to be scrambling to try and contain the latest outbreak between Israel and Lebanese Hezbollah, trying to prevent a regional war. I think this may become topic number one here this week. We'll see how it develops.
Margaret, thank you so much. VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bishia live for us from the UN headquarters in New York. Tanzania's Chadema party officials say police arrested top opposition figures on Monday as the authorities moved to block a mass protest in Dar es Salaam. Despite an official ban, the opposition Chadema party had vowed to rally over the alleged kidnapping and killing of its members by security forces. Chadema says its chairman, Freeman Mbowe, and his deputy, Tundu Lissu, were both arrested on Monday. This came as riot police was stationed in key areas across the city to prevent gatherings. VOA's Philip Alexiou spoke with Hassan Mhelela, a reporter with VOA affiliate Azam TV in Dar es Salaam.
Main opposition party has issued a statement saying that over 40 members were arrested in different parts of the country as the police were cracking down on the protest, which was organized by this the main opposition party over what they claim to be kidnapping and disappearance of members by the security forces. So basically, that's what happened. The center of attention or focus of attention was Dar es Salaam, the commercial capital, where the chairman of that party was also arrested, as well as his vice chairman. So we now know that some of those who were arrested have been released, but some of them are still in custody.
Was there much violence involved?
Apparently, the organizers said that they wanted to do a peaceful rally, but the police said that it should not go ahead, regardless of the reasons for organizing it. Now, despite the official ban, the opposition party went ahead. And actually, they vowed to go ahead, but we can say that the gatherings were scattered. It was not one single huge gathering of protesters. In different parts of the country, we have had reports of their supporters gathering to register their protest against the alleged violations of human rights. But it wasn't as big as expected, and the reason was that police had done their homework to prevent it instead of tackling the protesters. And we can see there is a strong presence of police or security across the city. It's unlikely these gatherings will continue, but we are still monitoring.
That was a reporter Hassan Mhelela of VOA affiliate Azam TV in Dar es Salaam speaking with VOA's Philip Alexiou. The last 2 U.S. service members have left Niger as part of America's military withdrawal following the country's July 2023 coup per an agreement reached by the U.S. and Niger in May. The only American service members now in the country are those securing the U.S. Embassy in Niamey. U.S. Africa Command's Major General Kenneth Ekman was one of those 2 service members. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb sat down with General Ekman at the Pentagon just days after the final withdrawal to learn about how the new U.S. military footprint in West Africa is beginning to take shape.
We were down to the last 2, and that was the last 2 Title X DoD members not assigned to the embassy and had to leave by 15 September as was mutually agreed. Our goal in the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Niger was to make it safe, orderly, and responsible. And then our goal through all of this, all the way to the last day, was to preserve strategic options for both nations. We still have shared security objectives. How we will pursue them, either together or apart as a consequence of the withdrawal, remains to be seen, but we wanted to make sure we kept all options on the table. But it is a strategic setback with regards to how each of us pursues our security objectives in the region.
Retired Major General Marcus Hicks, who was the Special Operations Lead for AFRICOM, he said that losing Niger means that we've lost our ability to directly influence counterterrorism and counterinsurgency in the Sahel. Is that true?
So in a regional approach, if there was one country that was most important on our ability to address Sahelian VEO problems, or the Sahelian VEO challenge, it was Niger. So for one of Niger, I talked about it as a strategic setback. The degree to which that setback endures ties to how we reposition and then what our partners want to do with us. So I agree with him in principle, but that is a snapshot in time. All is not lost in where AFRICOM is focused, where the department is focused, and frankly where the interagency is focused, is what do we do next, because our security objectives haven't changed.
But now analysts are telling VOA that Niger could fall to the jihadists. Niger could be next. How likely is it that they could fall?
So their risks have definitely gone up. Their ability to confront violent extremist organizations, intel sharing, partnership with our and other allied forces, it's gotten worse. And so they are a capable force. The degree to which they can handle the problem themselves remains to be seen. It is a fact that in Niger, violent extremist attacks have become more lethal. That's a fact since the coup on 26 July 2023. They've got fewer resources and fewer partners.
So Ivory Coast, Benin, Ghana, these are all countries that General Langley, the head of U.S. Africa Command, has said that the U.S. is talking to as it recalibrates, was the term he used, recalibrates its West Africa presence. There have been reports of the U.S. refurbishing an airfield in Benin to accommodate U.S. aircraft. There's been reports of special forces, U.S. special forces in the Ivory Coast. Can you confirm this, and have you reached a deal with any of these countries?
So the most lethal violent extremist organization threat in the world resides in West Africa, and it resides in the Sahel. It's also spreading. The primary direction of travel is to the southwest. So well prior to the Niger coup, we were already working with partners on what they needed with regards to U.S. presence and capabilities to support their counter-VEO ops. In the Benin case, we started that a while ago. In the Cote d'Ivoire case, it's been really post-coup. So each of them is on their own timeline. If our presence in Niger allowed us to go inside out relative to the Sahelian-based VEO threat, we now have to revert to going outside in. Countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Benin, Chad, our access to them and the degree to which they want to partner with us will influence how we go outside in. Where and if we establish significant presence of forces, probably on a partner base, serving alongside them, doing everything from command and control, personnel recovery, to sustaining them and to medically treating them. And that is something where we're not there yet and no agreements have been made. There are some cases where, for now, we're definitely not. And so that's true in Nigeria, likewise in Ghana. The ones where things are still kind of under consideration, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, what we want to do is within the partners' needs, support their partner-led, U.S.-enabled counter-VO ops. That's how we're focused.
For more on the U.S. troops' withdrawal from West Africa, I'm joined by VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb. Carla, General Ekman mentioned the importance of Chad, where the U.S. pulled out their forces earlier this year ahead of a presidential election. Is the U.S. bringing forces back into Chad?
Well, good evening, Esther. It is sounding and looking a lot like that is the case. The U.S. and Chad have an understanding, according to Major General Ekman, that both sides want U.S. forces back in Chad. They are still ironing out the details at this point, but at this, as they move forward, both tend to want the U.S. to come in. I've been told by General Ekman that the U.S. does want a smaller presence than it had before. The U.S. pulled about 70 special forces out before the election earlier this year. And so they are looking at a smaller presence whenever the details are finalized.
Carla, he also mentioned U.S. troops would not be setting up a larger presence in Ghana, which is a strong military partner of the United States. Did he give a reason for this?
That's right. Ghana is a very strong partner, a military partner with the United States, and he stressed that. And so when I asked him, well, why aren't they interested in having U.S. forces on the ground, he said because they're such a capable force, they are interested in fighting their own fight. They want the United States to provide help, training them, equipping them in order to build their own capacity, but they don't want the U.S. fighting alongside them. This is their fight, they feel like, and they're going to fight this fight alone.
And Carla, who is replacing U.S. troops in Niger now that help outside of the U.S. is no longer there? Who might be helping out to counter extremists?
Well, we've talked about this before. There is a small number of Russian forces that are in Niger. Niger has signed an agreement with the Russians 2 governments ago, so their cooperation is nothing new, but they are having to rely more and more on the Russians, and General Ekman is telling me that the Russians have such a limited presence there, and on the flip side, the United States has pulled out of 2 military bases, the French have pulled out, the Germans have pulled out, so there's a real void in a partnership for Niger, and we will just have to see how this plays out as those violent extremist organizations continue to grow.
And Carla, is the Pentagon concerned about what happens next to the region? Because it's been chaotic, coups, counter-coups, and now extremism in the Sahel, in that area. So what are they saying might be probably coming up in the next couple of months or years?
Absolutely. Major General Michael Langley, the head of U.S. Africa Command, says that AFRICOM needs to recalibrate and is in the process of recalibrating to see where their forces need to be to try to fight this fight, because they have a void now. The intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance that was based in Niger, that has been pulled out. And so it's much harder to keep an eye on these terrorists. And as you mentioned, with all of these coups going on, the State Department has restrictions that the U.S. military serves to uphold democracy. So if there's not a democratic partner to work with, they are very limited on what they can do to help support these nations.
Carla, many thanks for your reporting. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb reporting live for us from the U.S. military headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, President William Ruto visits Haiti to support Kenya's anti-gang fighting mission. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
In other news, severe flooding in Chad since July has claimed at least 503 lives and affected around 1.7 million people, according to the United Nations. The UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Chad says floods have destroyed over 212,000 houses, flooded nearly 358,000 hectares of land, and drowned over 69,000 heads of cattle. The son of Uganda's long-serving leader, Yoweri Museveni, says he has abandoned plans to run for presidency in the next election in 2026. Muhoozi Kainerugaba instead is urging his supporters to endorse his father. President Museveni, who has led the country for 38 years, is widely expected to run for a seventh term, even though he has not yet confirmed his candidacy. And a new report by the International Rhino Foundation reveals that the worldwide rhino population has increased slightly, but so have the killings, mostly in South Africa, as poaching fueled by a huge demand for rhino horns remains a top threat. A total of 586 rhinos were killed in Africa in 2023, rising from 551 reported in 2022, according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Kenyan President William Ruto says he is open to Kenya's anti-gang fighting mission in the country being converted to a UN peacekeeping operation. Ruto visited violence-plagued Haiti to assess the progress of the multinational security support mission, where Kenya is playing a leading role to curb rampant gang violence that has ushered years of political chaos and mass displacement.
On the suggestion to transit this into a fully UN peacekeeping mission, we have absolutely no problem if that is the direction the UN Security Council wants to take it.
The mandate of the multinational security support mission, first approved by the UN Security Council for 12 months, is set to expire at the start of October. Kenya was the first nation to send forces as part of a more significant effort by the UN to offer international support to Haiti, which has spiraled into conflict and political turmoil since the assassination of President Jovenel Moise in 2021. For more perspective, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke with Edgar Githua, an international security and diplomatic expert at Strathmore University in Nairobi, Kenya.
At least the Kenyan contingent currently of 400 soldiers, 400 policemen. So far, so good. They've done a commendable job, of course, with a bit of challenges. Reports indicate they have settled in well. Reports indicate they have been able to work hand in hand with the Haitian police force in reclaiming some of the areas from the gangs. We're talking about the airport. We're talking about one of the big hospitals within Port-au-Prince and some of the residential neighborhoods. So, and creating a humanitarian corridor that has allowed some Haitians who had run away to come back. So we can say gradually they have gone there. It's been a mixed bag. There have been some few complaints from Haitians who probably want them to move a bit faster, but I think the Kenyans and the Haitian police force are still not at the place where they feel they can move as fast as they want because of the logistics, the lack of resources, and they need, of course, better equipment. But so far, so good.
How significant is this trip for President William Ruto, considering the fact that he's faced a lot of challenges back home?
Yeah.
You have an uprising of young people taking onto the streets, but here we see Kenyans also trying to bring what a lot of people said was not possible, a semblance of peace in Haiti.
The diplomatic optics, number one, for Kenya are very good, and the dividend, Kenya will reap a very huge dividend when this mission eventually concludes in a successful manner. For President William Ruto, there are two things. Number one, he silences all the naysayers who told him, you are sending our boys to go and die. You're sending us into a bloodbath. So that in itself gives him that moral authority to tell them, I know what I was talking about. I told you our boys were ready for this. On the flip side, when the Kenyans, when we watch documentaries and we see Kenyans succeeding, it also gives us confidence and trust that we have a police force that is able to do a lot. And then, of course, on the flip side, the bigger question now for us becomes, then why can't they quell the banditry in our own country? Why can't they deal with our own internal security issues that have become a problem here and there? But having said that, Kenya gains diplomatically. It raises our stature. We are able to attract military aid. We are able to attract security aid. We are able to be a country that can be relied on, not only in the region, but in Africa. Post-conflict reconstruction, Paul, is usually a very long process. It is not a walk in the park. Today, things could be working out because of, we have the goodwill and the support of the Haitians. If after 4 or 5 months, the Haitians begin to become impatient, feeling like the Kenyans are really not bringing the change, the radical change we thought they would bring, when the ground starts shifting, the gangs start becoming stronger. We have to train the police force. At some point, we have to disarm those gangs. At some point, we have to convince Barbecue, Jimmy Cherizier and his gangs to lay down their weapons. That is a long, drawn process. And so you want to make hay while the sun is shining. You want to make as many gains as possible.
Edgar Githua is an international security and diplomatic expert at Strathmore University in Nairobi, Kenya. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.